Good day, nerds, and welcome to episode 112 of the Nerd Cantina Show. And today we have a Cantina conversation between our book reviewer, Megan McCarthy-Biank, and Paula Guran. Paula has put together a compilation of short stories titled The Year's Best Dark Fantasy and Horror, Volume 1. This book is set to release here on October 20th, just in time for the Halloween season. If you're looking for some short stories you can pick up and quickly get into and put down and get back to later, this is a great example. And in this interview, Megan talks about how Paula's gotten into this craft of editing and putting together short stories. Paula has been writing for a very long time, and you could say blogging before blogging was cool. I think you'll enjoy the interview, so stick around, take a listen.
So we are here with Paula Guran. Her book, The Year's Best Dark Horror or Dark Fantasy and Horror, Volume 1, is going to be released on October 20th. And so, like I said, thank you so much, Paula, for taking the time to meet with us and, giving, something a little seasonal to offer our readers and our listeners to help us get into the mood, for the Halloween season, and also, kind of diving in and giving us a little bit something extra, as we talk about some of the things that are going on in this anthology. Okay, so we can start with going over, maybe you want to go over briefly your background, maybe professionally, and then how you got into, developing, this line of work is just kind of, reviewing and collecting and going through the process of going through all these crazy and amazing stories to include in your collection that you release. I'm guessing on an annual basis, right? Because I know you have some other collections that, aside from it as well.
Well, it started a long time ago, back in the mid-90s, and I was just kind of at a turning point in my life, I guess. And I just happened to get into dark fiction. And in those days, I was a real pioneer. I know it sounds funny now, but I had one of the first email newsletters in 1995. That was a new and different thing. And also did online workshops and interviews through, at that time it was live chat on AOL of all things, which was in those days. I literally remember the first convention I ever went to. It was a jam-packed room, and the first question was, should I get an email as a writer? I mean, this is how long ago it was. And like I said, 95, 96 or so. So I got started just kind of as an avid fan, and it just worked into people were just very open and friendly to somebody that was, had a little bit of respect for them. And I started reviewing and, like I said, I did interviews, things like that with this newsletter I did, which then, of course, became a website after that. And just gradually got into the more professional end of it. And eventually round up, I guess it was around 20 years ago or so, I did my first anthology and then didn't do anything more with it. I did short fiction. I did magazine work. I had a magazine for a while. And then worked for somebody else for a magazine. But the anthologies then started up again about 2005 or 6. And I started working for, they started a imprint, Juno Books, which is when I did a couple anthologies for that. The first one was Best Paranormal Romance. And that's when I started doing a best of some type. And then that worked into, like I said, about 11, 12 years ago to Year's Best. The publisher at that time, Prime Books, had a Year's Best science fiction already. So he wanted something to complement it. And that became, basically, it was an odd job as an editor. It was a full-time job editing, but I did anthologies as part of that job. I also did acquisitions and novels and collections, but doing the anthologies was for that, just part of the whole job.
Oh, okay. That's really cool that you started back when the digital
I just
environment was
I just
so new.
created a niche for myself. I mean, it was just, like a lot of people do now with podcasts or whatever. It was, something that wasn't really there before, and I just kind of got into it. So it's cool.
Yeah, and luckily it kind of, it didn't go away at all. So
yeah, I mean, it actually turned into something that, not that it's ever made a great living, but it made my living. Right now, with Prime, they've downsized radically, and so I don't have that job anymore and have to do freelance only, which could always use more work. And I liked the steady getting the paycheck every month was nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And going out and saying, hey, don't you want to hire me?
Right. Exactly. At least had something consistent for the most part. Yeah. So how has, since you started this about 25 years ago, how has like the, the advancements in technology, like have they changed your process at all? Like how you approach these types of projects, or how you do your research? Like how have you kind of like had to adapt with, the changes in the digital world?
There's just so much more online now. I mean, 20 years ago, it just wasn't viable to have professional fiction online. Oh my. And it wasn't even too professional. I mean, it just wasn't being done because at that time, there wasn't a way to monetize it. I mean, and there wasn't even a way to charge for a prescription because there wasn't PayPal. There wasn't anything that you could charge just a little bit for something. So that's been the biggest change since I've been doing a year's best, like 12 years now. So much more of it is online. Some of the best professional venues are online now. Print is unfortunately kind of fading away. On the other hand, that means there's lots of stuff out there that you can have access to as a reader.
Absolutely.
So I think the big change now is that I see a lot more on my screen or on my Kindle than I do, in paperback form. That's the big change, I'd say.
Yeah, I always appreciate that having I do, I guess I love having the physical copy of a book. I think I held out for a while of actually getting myself a Kindle. And then once I did, I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing? I could carry a bunch of books in my little purse.
I love books. I mean, I was the kid that, if I grow up and I can actually go buy whatever book I want, that's success, And now after, a couple of years ago, I downsized from the big family house to a smaller apartment, and I probably got rid of 1,000 books then. And I still have 3 rooms full of books here. So that's what I like now. It's like I actually prefer, a digital form of something simply because, for one thing, if you do acquire it, if you decide, hey, I like the story, you have a version that you can usually turn into something without bothering anybody.
Right.
But also simply because it's just a matter of space. I mean, I have too many books.
No, I'm right there with you. I mean, we struggle with maximizing the space in the house, and just can we put a shelf here? Can we put there's a big wall, let's get a shelf, and then we can use this space. We can try to get use of everything that we have, and if I didn't have a Kindle, I would I think I don't have 3 rooms or 3 bookshelves, but we have, I think, about 2.5 that
give yourself a few more years. It comes.
Yeah.
Also, when I was reviewing a great deal, I would get 40 or 50 books a month. I mean, sent to me, review copy.
Wow.
And I literally had a big laundry basket by the front door with free, take me, It's like anybody come in the house, want a book, there's, 30 or 40 to pick from there.
That sounds so awesome.
I know it was. It's like a dream come true, and it turned into a nightmare. Yeah, it's like I said. It's just and at the time when I was getting so many reviews, I mean, oh my God, there was just you wanted to read everything, And it's great, but at the same time, nowadays, really, in fact, the pandemic really cut down even on review copies print. You used to get an advanced review copy in print form, and now most of the publishers have kind of said, "Hey, don't you want an ebook of that?" So it's still though. I get plenty of books to fill up my house.
Yeah, because that brings up a good point. Because I interview authors, and I always ask how has this year kind of thrown a wrench into what you're kind of used to as business as usual, in terms of not only maybe writing, but also like the promotion process, as you prepare for release. And I think a lot of them, a lot of authors are really grateful that, people are still picking up their books, considering that a lot of people are not working, or they have to be a little tighter on the budget. And then they also appreciate, like, even though they can't do the physical, like in-person events with the physical copies of the books and meet the readers, they can at least, they appreciate that you could still download a digital version on your e-reader, which is safe. And you don't have to risk, exchanging hands or packaging, and you could just have it on your device that has always been yours, essentially. And so, that's any other ways that like how the pandemic and the year 2020 in general has kind of like, you've been kind of forced to switch things up or maybe just adjust to it?
Not for me so much. I think down the line, as far as getting more work, say, I have another volume of this set up for next year, and I have something I've already completed set up for next year. But right now, publishers are being very cautious on what they want to commit to, because they had to back up a lot of things. A lot of things were delayed. And so at this point, that's going to affect me more next year of, hello, I could use the word, kind of thing. As far as, being isolated at home, I've been working remotely for 20 years. I mean, that's how I do this. And so that's not been a change at all. I mean, it's like, hey, I was there,
Yeah, right.
But and like I said, as far as getting copies of things or whatever, hasn't had any effect. So I think that, I haven't gone to conventions for the last few years, but I think that's beginning to bother people. And that's also that's a really good place for editors to be able to meet writers and back and forth. And, that certainly stopped completely. So I think that's probably an effect on everybody, as you have, that one time, maybe even in 5 years, that you might have physical contact with somebody.
Right.
And hey, it's like, and it's a lot of hugs. There's lots of people that you've known for years. I've known somebody for years, and you finally actually meet them in the flesh, and you just feel like, hey, and that big hug of, gee, I've known you all my life kind of thing.
Right.
So, I think that's going to wear on people eventually, sitting around the bar and talking to a real person. But so far for me, it's not been, anything really bad, other than I had to isolate from grandkids for a while, but lived through that.
Yeah. And it's, it's hard on everybody. And I think just, once you look at all different industries.
The state of the world is hard on everybody.
Yeah. It's kind of funny that it's like, the timing of this book, it's kind of like, well, why not? Let's just immerse ourselves into like,
I definitely, I don't know. Did you read the introduction when you read the book?
I did. Yeah. You chose the stories like before all of this.
It was actually as it was happening. I mean, I was putting the book together, a lot of choosing it, but I was literally putting the book together in March and April, So,
right. Okay.
I felt like, oh, geez, why do we want to read this stuff?
Yeah.
Why does anybody want? I mean, I remember 9/11, there was an immediate reaction of, oh God, the world is bad enough. Why do I want to read horror? And, I kind of was inspired a little bit, because I found out that, there is reasons to read it when all the world is horrific. There are reasons that you want to read it, and you find something there.
No, I agree. And I'm, it's funny because like the first, I'm pregnant with my second, I'm due at the end of November. Congrats. And thanks. And the first story is about this woman who's experienced like,
I had 4 children. I have 4 grandchildren, and my oldest daughter is expecting her first at age 40 in January. Oh, wow. So, sometimes stories just really get to you right off.
I remember like reading the story like right from the get-go. I was like, okay, this is how we're starting.
I remember reading I read The Handmaid's Tale when I was 9 months pregnant. Which,
oh God.
That's another book that really, you suddenly look at pregnancy different.
Oh God. Yeah. I remember, I haven't read the book, but I started watching the show. Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't, right. No, but I started watching the show, I think about a month postpartum, after having my first. And I was like, why? This was probably not a good idea to start this right now. Like,
Definitely.
But it is fascinating. And I think that's like, just kind of speaks to like the level of the connection, even if like, oh, why do we want to read this type of stuff right now? It's like, well, I don't know. 'Cause then it's still a way to unwind. It's still a way to relate to characters and storylines and certain themes. It's still kind of like a way to either think like, oh, I'm not alone, or this is, imagine if things were this way or things were this bad. Or maybe, if you step into the supernatural, with either ghosts or, spirits and what have you, it's still kind of like, it kind of brings that back because it brings that, sense of like I said, like getting into the Halloween spirit. Like I love Halloween,
right.
And, yes, it's different this year because people aren't sure, like, what's like safe and what people are going to be allowed to do, what kind of regulations are still going to be in place and whatnot. But I think because things will be different this year, they have been, I think, these stories are kind of a way to like still get you into like a little sense of normalcy, what maybe somebody's expecting, like the overall vibe to be this time of year.
Yeah, and some stories actually do have hope to them. I think that's why dystopic fiction is kind of popular now. It's because, it's like if you're reading something, okay, the end of the world's come, but obviously there's at least one person left to tell the story.
Yeah.
And, it's like,
yeah.
you can always hang on to that hope that you're that last person if that's what you want to be, or in traditional horror, not so much what I do a lot, but, in your traditional Stephen King kind of horror, there is always a quote unquote happy ending simply because you go through all of this and you survive. There are losses, there's a journey, but you still survive. So at the end of it, you do have that exhalation of we made it through somehow,
Yeah, I definitely got that with a couple of the stories. Like it's, a lot of them are like eerie and creepy and, they leave me still wanting a little bit more. But I think most short stories do that anyway, where they kind of leave you, some of them kind of like, are just open-ended in general. But I think, what was it? I think that was one of the ones where it was like the author and her best friend / assistant. And
the other one.
Yeah, and I was just like
creepy.
I remember it was really creepy, and then it's so funny how her best friend was just kind of like an expert at what this woman was going through. And it was just that was definitely an example of something that was like really creepy and eerie, and I was like, oh, wait a second. And then it was just kind of like, oh, but it ended, okay. Like it left you a little comfort.
They were both happy, I mean, it's like, oh, so what if, this is happening to me and this is my creative process. I mean, very creative.
Exactly. No, yeah. Stories like that where you're just kind of like, oh, okay.
No,
like
there are
like, oh, it's a little comfort. Yeah. No, for sure. So like, I think you kind of touched on this before. So why do you find yourself gravitating towards like the dark fantasy / horror genre?
When I first started out, I mean, I read science fiction more growing up and, in early adulthood. I wasn't a big horror fan because I didn't know what was out there. The classics, yes. I mean, classic ghost stories and, M.R. James and, people like that, that you read, you run across in the library and things, and you run across it and you appreciate it. But I mean, I didn't read a lot of horror. And when you look at it, I mean, that whole era of my adulthood was dominated by horror becoming a genre with Stephen King. I mean, it wasn't really, it was part of fantasy. It was part of science fiction. It was just not what it is now. So it was new to me when I got into it to find these great writers and to find novels or short fiction that, whoa, it just literally blew me away that this stuff was being written. It was very new then. And so it's like, it depends on what I like. There's lots of different kinds of stuff out there. I'm not a big, for instance, horror movie fan at all, because that's pretty much shock. I mean, that's it. It's like booga booga scare you. And again, I'm much more attracted to the unnerving, the uncanny, the unsettling, that the story that breaches that little veil between our world and something else, I'm more along the lines than being scared, which is why I think I emphasize the dark fantasy more, simply because the word horror has just been deprecated from people equate it with movies, and and there's nothing you can do about that. So, but if that's your impression of what these stories are like, then you probably got the wrong impression.
And the delivery, I think, or at least when you're consuming this genre in literature form versus screen, I'm kind of with you there. Like, I don't really like being scared. I have friends who just they get so excited for scary movies, and I'm like, I'm not crazy about them. I'd rather,
Yeah, I mean, once in a while there's a great one, but overall it's like, for one thing, I always can figure out what's going on. There's nothing that, this is how it's going to end. So it doesn't affect me like the literature does, it's not, and I'm not a big fan of gore and slashing, and, that's just not enjoyable. That's just gross, so,
I know what you mean. That's interesting how you say, like, you kind of see it coming on screen, but then when you're reading it, it's kind of,
yeah, just like the story that you mentioned. I mean, it's just like, I really didn't know what was going on there. I really wasn't sure, until, but okay.
Yeah, until her best friend starts talking about it.
Yeah,
explaining okay, no,
you don't have any memory of this, but
right, just stay with me here. It was, that was so.
And
funny.
To me, the worlds are so much more complete too. I mean, it's there for you to imagine, and if an author has established this, distinct world, and you can immerse yourself in it. Yet you can disconnect from it. Nothing's being overdone or underdone. You're more in control of it.
No, that's true. You bring up a good point, because sometimes, this is the first collection of short stories that I've read in a long time. A lot of the time I read, the traditional novels or duology or trilogy sets. And so, but it took me a while to get in the vibe of it, because I had to get used to
it's over.
Okay, now we're moving on. Something
completely different for the next time.
Yeah. And so, but once I got into the hang of it, it was really nice to be able to just kind of do just that, just kind of read the story and then put it down and then go on to life, and then pick it back up again with a whole a fresh new story.
It's great. The short fiction's great for new mothers.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Exactly. You don't have to feel like you have to get in the zone, or, you don't have to remember, wait, what's going on?
Go away, honey. Let me just finish this chapter.
Yeah.
Dangerous, so.
Exactly. It's wait, I got 3 pages left. Just give me a second.
Then the house burns down.
Yeah, I might have to pick up a couple more of your year's best or the other anthologies that you got going on.
I have lots of themes, so whatever appeals to you.
Yeah. No, I noticed that. I was doing a little bit of research to kind of get to know your work, and it's very impressive. You got definitely been busy over your career.
Yeah.
So thus far, but like you said, you're you seem to really enjoy it, and it was nice, consistent work, and you're kind of offering a little something different for either lovers of reading in general or lovers for this particular genre. So really appreciate it. So do you during your selection process, do you find yourself kind of choosing the same authors, or do you kind of look at authors that you've chosen in the past to see what else they have coming up?
There's a few authors that you just almost can't go wrong with. I mean, that they simply, they're good. I mean, and so I do kind of check in on, what has so-and-so done this year, or even ask them directly, what have you done this year? And so it's Stephen Graham Jones is one I almost always find, check into what he's done, and Angela Slatter. There's a few people like that I just kind of almost, they may not be in every year, but there's certainly people that and then you find new writers that it's so exciting to find somebody just, whoa, who is this person? And, I try to kind of keep up with them, and it is so wonderful to see somebody who maybe you'd never heard of when you selected that first story. And then, a few years later, wow, they've done really well. And, the story that you mentioned, Rebecca Campbell's, that just won a Sunburst Award in Canada. So it's kind of validation for you making these selections, is that, hey, other people recognize this is good too. But it's not like I'm really, I'm not slavish to any set of authors or individuals. But I do try to keep up, and you're always looking for that new name, that new person that you've never seen or heard of before too.
Yeah. So how do you go, where do you look for when you go try to maybe look for new names?
Yeah. Like I said, there's so much stuff online now, and a lot of those periodicals feature all editors like to discover people. So, it's kind of, that's part of it, is simply that they're looking for that new person too. So, I review for Locus. And so every other month I do a column that concentrates on short fiction. So there's those that I'm constantly keeping update with those periodicals. And I also look for people's other reviewers' recommendations. If somebody else finds a story or an author that they say, wow, I really like this, I look at that too. So, and you just read a lot. That's a lot of it. Other than what I do reviewing, I do kind of, this time of year, I sent out a call about a month ago. I don't start reading I make notes. I say, I like this. But I don't do the intense reading until getting towards the end of the year. And then you start trying to keep your handle on it and finding out, hey, there's a new anthology that you haven't read, or, there's a new periodical you've never heard of, or whatever. So, then you kind of come down to a crunch time of where you really are going through a lot of material fairly quickly over a couple of months period. You make your final selections, and the ones that there's some that from the start, I got to have that unless Ellen takes it, which is Ellen Datlow, who also was my mentor and got me into this stuff too. So,
sure.
Yeah, she, it's like once in a while she gets one and asks for it before I get to it, and I've got her a few times. So, and also we do, I very distinctly remember a couple of times when she said she goes more for the scarier type of story. And so, she'll say, this was just not horror enough, but it is definitely dark fantasy. Take a look at it. So once in a while you get a good tip like that too.
Oh, that's kind of cool, where it's like sometimes you kind of fight over some stories.
Well, we never fight. We never fight. But she also has seniority on me, so
sure.
She's got the awards. She's got that. So I'm not going to fight.
She's still kind of looking out for you, though.
Like I said, so it's we've known each other forever now, and it's just like we also respect each other's tastes. We have very similar tastes, really. It's just that she goes one direction with hers, and I, it's from the beginning went a different direction with mine. So we're very compatible. You should read both. So
okay.
Also, since she does so many, she does a lot of original anthologies. Very often you'll find many of the stories edited by Ellen Datlow if you look in the fine print.
Datlow, okay. I'll have to remember that name. I'll have to look her up for
definitely.
My postpartum reading.
Yeah, there you go. There you
go. So what stories from this particular book or edition or collection have stuck out to you the most?
I don't know. I read very much for, horror, it's the old adage now that horror is an emotion, and we all react emotionally differently. So I go a lot of time with gut feeling of something that really hits me, and then I remember a month later that, whoa, yeah, I still makes that effect. So I know one story that hit me immediately when I read it was The Surviving Child Speaking About Being a Mother Again by Joyce Carol Oates.
Yeah.
That one simply, and it's Gothic, and it's all those old themes of the stepmother and the semi-haunted house. I mean, but there was something about that. And of course, Joyce Carol Oates is a pretty good writer. She's like been recognized by every award in the world, so it's one of those things of where that's the kind of story that you're just going, whoa. That one hit me just immediately,
Yeah, it did. And I think it was one of the longer ones.
Yes, it wasn't the longest one.
Yeah.
This version. So.
No, I think the longest one was, which one was it?
I think that's the longest in this one, maybe. I get, that's one difference between this one and the 11 previous or the 10 previous volumes is that I don't have quite as much room. I'm about 20,000 words less word count.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So in the past, I've been able to do a novella or two. Now I have to be a little carefuler on the length of it. So
you don't necessarily restrict yourself to numbers of stories, but you kind of restrict page or word count.
You have a word count basically of, it's just a matter of the previous editions. We intentionally were looking for a big fat brick of, close to 200,000 or 200,000 and more words, which is a lot of stories. This is, I think this one's around 170, something like that. So, like I said, that I miss out now on the novellas. I'm sure in the future I'm going to regret that, a little bit more, but it was nice to indulge once in a while, be able to run. The longest story I've ever run was like 22,000 words. But it was George R.R. Martin, so it paid off. It's one of the few.
That's almost a minimum for him. I don't know.
And also that's one of the few names that I never put anything in that I don't consider a great story. But let's face it, some names on the cover get more attention.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that's one of those things of I checked with the publisher and he said, "Yeah, go for it. You can get the rights. Go for it." So,
you got to work with what you can get.
There you go. So otherwise, it's like I think every story. I think I and going back to the process, I kind of have to go back and look at every story. But some of them were actually picks, but you have to balance things out. You don't want too many stories about girls who were killed as teenagers and are now coming back as ghosts. One way or another. You could. I do theme anthologies. I know how many stories of a theme you can get. You don't want a year's best that has 10 stories that are haunted house stories or whatever.
Exactly. So there's definitely like a good variety.
Yeah, you have to balance that. The other thing is on these authors who you may have half a dozen stories from one author. And you're going, you can't have half a dozen stories from one author. You can get one, So again, sometimes it's, just measuring, wow, this is, which one of these do I want? Which one works best with the other stuff, So
I would feel that's probably one of the more challenging aspects of it is like you have to choose and limit yourself to you find so many good works by one particular author.
Yeah, sometimes you'll have a year, but you can't, and sometimes it's with the author. It might even be things that they wrote 2 years ago or something. That everything sometimes kind of comes together at one time. Maybe they'll be in 3 or 4 anthologies that year, and they hadn't been in an anthology for 4 years previous to that,
Oh, right.
So, it's just kind of like, wow, you have 12 stories out there this year. Next year you might have 2. So,
sure.
so there's all sorts of things like that you have to balance and weigh.
Yeah. No, I imagine, but it's, after, as you said, it's like what your 12th one, you kind of seem to get your routine down.
Yeah.
The process
I think altogether I've done something like 45 or more anthologies now in the last 14, 15 years.
Yeah. So, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's so much.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So,
do you ever have any plans or any ideas to like write your own original story?
I tried a few times back when I first got into this stuff. I'm not a writer. I don't have the imagination. I'm an editor. There are a few people out there that can do both. I think as an editor, your better editors tend to be people who are editors. And, there are some people who can do both, but I think, that's been it's kind of like some people say you're born a writer. I think I've always had that talent or that inclination. Whereas I think people who want to write original material, they want to do that, from the very beginning.
Yeah, I see what you mean there. Cause I think my husband has asked me that too. Like, have you ever thought about because I read so much, I'm a huge bookworm, and he's like, well, would you ever, ever thought about writing your own? And I'm like, I don't know, like kind of going off of that. Like, I think I just, I would have to set the bar so high that I feel like I just wouldn't. Right. I wouldn't get there. I wouldn't do it justice.
You have good taste
I'm not,
already, and you want to be as good as so and so, and you.
Yeah, exactly.
And honestly, the world really has not maybe enough writers. There's always that one new one or other, but I mean, there are an awful lot of people who think they can write a book who really can't these days, and they can get it published one way or another. And so, it's not, I think being discriminating is not at all a bad thing. So,
you just be honest with yourself. Yeah.
As a writer, you have to have the kind of ego that you can accept defeat and rejection constantly.
That's true. Yeah. Because you just hear about publishers just, the writers just being turned down.
And sometimes it's just sometimes it's just not the right fit. I know when I was acquiring for Juno was an imprint that concentrated on novels that were fantasy with a strong female lead character for the most part. And so, I mean, that we were very specific in what we wanted to do. And so people would send me, something with a male, male protagonist, and go, well, no, this isn't for us. And you would get that email back from a cranky author saying, if this had been Harry Potter, you would have rejected it. Yeah, I would have, because we don't do YA.
Right.
So sometimes short stories are like that. Sometimes it may be a great story, but it just doesn't fit that particular niche. So sometimes you have to reject very good stuff, and an author has to be able to roll with that and keep going. And it's not an easy job at all. So.
No, I totally get it. The more the interviews and the more authors I speak to, the more books I read and more I learn about the publishing and editing and a process in addition to, doing the press and gearing for the release date. You learn a lot about how many authors' experiences are so different, and even going into this year where, some authors are debuting their first printed work or first published work. And unfortunately it's during a year where, everything's just been turned upside down. And, I kind of feel for them, because it's you've probably been writing this story.
It's just been your dream since you were a kid, and this is my book, and here's my baby book, and no one's going to read it in my life.
Yeah, I know.
And that's, unfortunately, in publishing, that's every year. I mean, this may be a particularly bad year to launch something new, but at the same time, it is constant. There's, it's just one of those things that you have to deal with. And, it's whether it's short fiction or novel or whatever. I know on a novel, I have a friend who was encouraging me, said, you should write this sort of book because you do. And I'm going, I'm not a writer. I said, I don't understand why anyone wants to write a novel, because it takes all of that time and effort and pain. And then you have no guarantee that anyone's ever going to see it, So I think you have to have the right kind of attitude and ego, and I don't think I do.
Oh, for sure. No, and I think you've made a really good name and career for yourself in, giving other authors the kind of
I love doing
avenue.
That,
yeah, no, and
authors are really cool people, as you found, I'm sure. It's nice to be able to give them a platform, whether you're doing it, starting out when I was doing interviews and reviews, that's one way. And another way is, like I said, as an editor, that's just kind of an extension of here's another way to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So they shouldn't want me to write either.
Yeah.
I do nonfiction.
There's poor competition.
Yeah, I do nonfiction, but no, not going to do the fiction.
No, okay. It's like you're trying to stay in your lane here.
That's right. We've all got to be unique.
Exactly. So I'll go ahead and start wrapping up here because
I think we have enough for you to edit something out of decent.
Oh, sure. Right. So one question. So I'll wrap up with two questions. One, what are you kind of touched on this earlier too, is what kind of plans do you have for future projects? And then do you have any recommendations for reading for me?
From this year, novel-wise, I'll go with recommendations first. There's a couple of books that I really liked. Silvia Moreno Garcia's Mexican Gothic.
Oh, okay.
Is really fun.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's just, I know a lot of people have been very scared from it. For me, it was fun because the heroine is set in 1950s Mexico and she dresses like Vogue. I mean, so she's like, she's this great heroine, but at the same time, it's like, this girl is walking through a cemetery with high heels on, which to me just, it makes it enjoyable. It's just a fun, scary book. Another one that I really, really, really liked was Stephen Graham Jones' novel. What's the name of it? Just totally blanked on that.
I'll just look up the name and if it was published.
I'm sure it's The Only Good Indians or The Last Indians, whatever. It's again talk about totally blanking on something. And I probably should have written things like that down.
No, it's okay.
But the thing about it is that it is a scary book.
Okay.
But it's totally off, just totally different too. Short fiction wise, there's an interesting new collection, The Best of Michael Marshall Smith, who he's been writing for about 30 years. He's that rare author. His first published story won the British Fantasy Award. I mean, that's the kind of thing people dream about. And this is his best of so far, huge, massive collection that I really enjoyed simply because although I've been reading him all these years, he lives in California now, but he's originally from Britain. And a lot of these stories were published in England, and I just didn't get a chance to catch up on them. But there's Kathy Koja has a great new
the
collection
cipher.
Out too. The Cipher. Velocities is the name of her collection. And she does not do much. Kathy's one of those people that write more. It's like people who know the cipher, she just doesn't do that much short fiction. So they are finding her short fiction because they know of her from earlier stuff.
Yeah, no, I've interviewed Daniel Krauss a few times, and he had one of the first interviews I did with him the cipher was one of his recommendations. That was and
that book came out in 98 or 99 or something. I mean, it's been out there a while, but I guess it's getting a new life, which is good.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I mean, he kind of sticks to the horror adjacent themes. He recently worked with George A. Romero's estate to release The Living Dead.
Right.
And which was really great. It's a long book, but it was very good. But yeah, I told him the same thing. I was like, I don't really like being scared. But if you're sticking with this genre, what do you recommend? And that was from Kathy Koja, that was the cipher was his recommendation.
Yeah, and it's a variety in that too. The Only Good Indian. It just came back to me. That's the title of Stephen's book. So yeah, and like I said, and anthologies. Ellen Datlow, you can't go wrong with her anthologies. Whether it's an original anthology with all new stories in it, or whether she's doing a reprint anthology. It's just once in a while she definitely has had better ones that you like better than others, but you can't really, you're not going to lose your nickel,
Okay.
So,
that's promising.
So those are just a few. I always hate to recommend because I can either go on forever or I do things I just.
Oh no, I get it. I appreciate it. No, I know.
And for the future, like I said, I know I'm doing two more of these. I got 3-year contracts, so I know that there'll be at least 2 more year's bests.
Oh, so the volume 2 and volume 3
so for the next few years,
okay.
Yeah. And then I have a book coming out, I think spring next year, called Far Out, which is recent queer stories. LGBT plus science fiction and fantasy.
Oh, nice.
That was just wonderful putting together. I really enjoyed that because, science fiction and fantasy, you'd think because of the type of fiction it is, of respecting the other, more or less, that's what it's all about, other and out of this world type of things. You'd always expected that you have a place in there for people who don't identify in the mainstream. And of course, that's not true.
Sure.
It hasn't been true, except now it is. In the last decade, it's really, it's really caught on. And so that you have wonderful authors, doing really unique stories. So that was fun. And plus, it also was science fiction and fantasy. So that was nice to get back into that instead of just the dark stuff.
Yeah. So is that your first time kind of diving into like that for that audience?
No. Well, it's the first time I've done like a gay theme, queer theme thing.
Sure. Okay.
But as far as science, I've done quite a few science fiction and fantasy anthologies. So it was really thrilling. I mean, the publisher actually came up with this idea. So I'm hoping also, I think it'll fill a need. I think it'd make a great, like university course text of people if they are looking at LGBT fiction. It's a nice nifty thing of, hey, this is what's gone on in the last 10 years, some good examples of short stuff that you can easily digest as opposed to just doing novels. So
for sure.
We'll
and it's important.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'll keep a lookout for it because it's important for lack of better words, or like the kind of cliche sounding, it is about inclusivity and representation and literature.
Diversity is a good thing. And when it comes to fiction, it's just like some of my favorite authors today, simply because, sure, all authors may have a great imagination, a great story, but it is nice to get that taste, that flavor of someone from a different background or who has a different type of experience to put into work. Can say something very valid or just be really entertaining or both. So,
it's just getting their story. The stories are out there.
Yeah. And like I said, it was just great finding them.
Yeah. No, for sure.
It was bad making Paula, decisions, but.
Oh no. It was like your expertise only takes you so far, I guess.
So otherwise, I'm still reviewing and always looking for new opportunities. So.
No, absolutely.
Anybody looking for an editor?
Yeah, right. No, I'll keep a lookout for anything that you have coming out, anything that your name is attached
to.
I'll certainly keep my eye out for it. So Paula Guran, thank you so much once again for taking some time out of your day and, releasing this collection and helping us get into the mood, the kind of eerie vibe and exactly, helping us cope during these, crazy times and, getting back into, kind of get the feel for getting excited about the holiday and in general, just offering something, short stories. It's easy to pick up and put down and pick up and put down again. And so the year's best dark fantasy and horror volume 1 is releasing on October 20th. Yep. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Like I said, we'll keep an eye out for what else you got to offer.
Great. It's been fun.
All right. And thank you for listening to episode 112 of the Nerd Cantina Show. If you enjoyed this, we hope that you'll go over to whatever your podcast player is and give us a rating, review, or at least hit the subscribe button and come back next week for our weekly news segment and our future Cantina conversations, as we'll be doing more of these as well as others. So until then, talk to you later, nerds.